This episode is brought to you by The Venture Project. Venture Project is a business incubator and co-working space in the fabulous Osh Vegas, Wisconsin. However, we do remote consults. We also travel all over the country. So if you guys have a business idea or are interested in participating in the Venture Project community, please go to theventureprojectoshkosh.com where you can learn more about me and the Venture Project itself. Once again, this is theventureprojectoshkosh.com. Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me at aaronjarmstrong.com or you can go to my Instagram account, aaronarmstrong33. Today's guest on the show, we had Brian Rowland, the founder of Abenity, a 6 times Inc. 5000 company that's powered corporate perks for top brands like US Bank and MasterCard. Now, while Abenity provides millions of subscribers with private discounts, the company's social mission is fighting extreme poverty with every program they deliver. Abenity recently exceeded $1 million of total giving and hired a CEO to accelerate their growth to a fully remote team. Now, Brian lives in Scottsdale with his wife and 3 daughters, investing his time and effort to help like-minded entrepreneurs establish social missions of their own. Stick around. We'll provide phone numbers at the end of the show so you can connect with him directly. Now, guys, Brian was a fantastic discussion. We talked about bringing in your family to your business. We talked about what the future of this remote work looks like and how some business leaders out there that might be fighting this issue of how much remote and how much in person we should have. We dig into those topics today on the show. And Brian has mastered this. He's been doing this for over 12 years working with remote businesses. So this is definitely an expert when it comes to how you can build a successful startup with managing people in different locations. I'll give you a little hint. You do that through purpose. And we're going to talk about how you can find your business purpose, how you can find social mission in what you're doing. So without any further ado, folks, I really think you're going to enjoy our discussion today with Brian Rowland. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
And how do you take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion?
All right, so joining me from Scottsdale, Arizona, we got Brian Rowland, the founder of Abenity, and we are going to talk about remote working situations. We're going to talk about how he's managed to do that 13 years. So this is 12 years prior to COVID-19, how he's grown a company, how he's used entrepreneurship as a means of giving, how he's made the Inc. 5000 6 times over again with his company. So this is really something special to have you on today, Brian. We're so grateful. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to diving in.
Well, this is awesome. I remember we were talking a little bit in pre-show just a moment ago about how 13 years you've been doing this remote working situation. And this was new to most people, I would say, the last couple years, and definitely last year with COVID-19. And if we end up going back that way or whatever, I'm kind of curious, what have you found is the main reason you've stuck with this 13 years? Because this has been an option for you. So it's like, why did you decide to do this and why did it work so well?
When you are a fully remote team, the world is your oyster when it comes to finding and recruiting and retaining talent. You can find very qualified, highly competent workers when you're not limited by geography. And so we have built a team with amazing people without geography as a factor. And that has probably been the main reason we've stuck with it, is because we just continually find A players and they're from all over the place. We support several military families on staff and they're moving every 2 years. They can't keep a job. They're saying all the time how jealous their fellow spouses are of their employment because their husbands get moved every couple of years. And so they get to be a nurse for 2 years somewhere and then they have to quit and go wherever they're stationed next and find a new job. And it makes it really hard for advancement. It makes it really hard for building relationships. And so we've skipped all that, even to the point where I think it was in 2015, one of my key team members came to me and said, "Hey, look, we've been stationed at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. We'll within a mile of the 9/11 5, like in that high security detention facility." And she's like, "How does that affect my work?" And I was like, "Well, will you have internet? Yeah. Will you have a phone? Yeah." so then what will be different with your workflow than now? She's like, well, I'm actually still in the same time zone. So nothing, I guess. I'll just be in Cuba. I was like, okay, well, we want to see those lobster pictures from your weekend swims or whatever. And so it's just been a series of that. And another piece of it is when we were just getting started as a startup, it was very critical for us to get things done. And when you're in that startup mode, generally you've got the entrepreneurs and then you've got a list of things that you have to get done that are mission critical, that they may not be what's driving revenue or driving even product development. And so you have this choice. It's like, well, I've got these 5 things. I've got the budget for a full-time person. Do I pick one person to do all 5 things of these administrative things? And inevitably, if you give one person 5 things to do, they'll get 3.5 of them done.
Right.
If you're lucky. And so instead of hiring one full-time person, we hired 5 part-time people. And we found that the greatest source of talent and competency out there for part-time workers are stay-at-home moms who have a 2-hour nap time that they can dive into high-level work, get stuff done. And that was a really neat way in the early days that we began building the business and supporting our growth.
So I've been just watching the remote work kind of unfold. And I think the big issue with remote work is in bigger organizations that have mediocre employees. Like if you think of a small business or a small startup, a lot of times you have the option to have the highly motivated people surround you, or you have great employees that are naturally going to get things done. I think the issue that a CEO might have of a Fortune 500, for example, is they're looking at this massive organization with a lot of mediocre employees that are going to take advantage of the system and abuse it. And I think that that could happen anywhere between 150 to 5,000 or 100,000, right? So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on watching this, someone that's made it work with a business of your size, which remind me again, how big is Divinity right now?
Well, we have 30 team members.
Okay. So it works well with your team. What do you think about if this were to grow? How would you keep that consistent? And what do you do about mediocre employees?
Well, I think it's a motivation problem. I think what you're talking about, the way you're defining mediocre, is really unmotivated people.
Right.
They're not very invested. They don't have ownership thinking. These are everyone's cultural challenges that they have, regardless of your venue, whether you're in person or remote. You have to tackle that. And I think the hardest mentality for an employer to get over is how you manage your people. Corporate is very used to managing activity and not output, meaning my expectation for you is to show up at 8 a.m., take an hour lunch, get a couple breaks, and leave at 5. As long as you do those things, you and I are good and you're doing your job. And us entrepreneurs are scratching our heads being like, what? That's what they expect. And so as opposed to the entrepreneurial organization, especially in startup years, just be like, I don't care how you do it. I don't care where you do it. I don't care when you do it. Just get it done. And as long as you get it done, you get to keep your job. So that is the output management style.
I couldn't agree more. You're exactly right. I think we've conditioned a culture to have policies and procedures in a bigger company rather than focusing on the results or the output. I think some managers would probably get that, but what are the results that you would look for? And how do you assess someone on their output? Or what are those results you're trying to gauge with your employees versus someone that's just showing up to a job? You're looking for someone that's actually doing a job. And I know some jobs are more obvious than others. Think of those FIFO kind of labor intensive jobs. Very easy to assess results, right? Assembly line types of things. But this kind of creative thinking or conceptual or strategy office jobs, right? That's a lot more difficult, but that's a lot more of what you kind of work with. So I'm just kind of curious on how you find out what those indicators are.
Yeah, most businesses I know have their kind of set of KPIs, those key performance indicators you reference, whether it's speed or production, time of service, or number of tickets resolved. All those KPIs need to be a piece of the puzzle and managed. They need to be watched to make sure that they're optimized. When you get into more creative work, graphic design or development or sales, advertising kind of has a lot of sales rules, then you start to measure the performance, you're just always measuring against those KPIs. So I think it's important to have a good understanding of what your KPIs are and be holding your people accountable to those KPIs and not really so worried about when and how they got it done when you're dealing with a fully remote team. As a manager or leader of a remote team, you need to get comfortable with this really strange idea. And the kind of the best way that I can think to put it is in your performance review with one of your team members, you need to be able to sit on the other side of the table and say, look, I just wanted to let you know that you're doing a good job and you're accomplishing what we expect for you to accomplish. And as long as you continue to prioritize your personal life above your work life, then I think we're going to be okay here, then staying on track with what we need to accomplish as a team. And you're like, wait, I'm sorry. Did you just say you want me to prioritize my personal life over my work life? You're like, what? And this is kind of the secret sauce of a remote team. A remote team is working from home. They're in their own environment. They're not in your environment. They are surrounded by their needs. They are not surrounded by your needs. And if you come in and you treat them like they're in your environment and like they're surrounded by your needs, then you just have this instant cultural barrier that just doesn't make sense. And you're not going to have their motivation and you're not going to connect with them and it's not going to feel authentic and you're going to get mediocre work. You're not going to get that buy-in, that ownership thinking, that motivated. But if you tell people, hey, look, these are our goals. I want you to take care of yourself, keep yourself healthy. I mean, this is where the whole concept of unlimited PTO kind of comes from. It's like you need your people to be healthy. You don't want to define what healthy is to them. And so you need to be able to trust them enough to take the time off they need and while getting their role done at the same time. And this is where it gets really difficult to infiltrate this idea into large corporations with lots of people, with lots of hierarchies. And it can totally happen, but it takes a very different mind shift. And you really need to be willing to put your people first very authentically for the purpose of accomplishing your own goals. And the big idea here is when you allow people to put themselves first, you're taking care of their needs, you're equipping them for their needs, which is what they need. You can't pretend like they don't have a family. You can't pretend like they don't have to go pick up their kids from school. You can't pretend like they don't have to do doctor's appointments. They have those needs. They need to do those things. And by allowing them to do that, you're trusting them and respecting them enough to get their work done. And you're measuring and monitoring their outputs to do that. Now, our entire support team is all shift driven. And so it is time constrained, but we have expectations of shifts when they show up and they do their work, but their activity is monitored and measured. We have many team members where it's kind of like, as long as you're getting your work done, if you need to shift your hours around, that's great. They know when the majority of team members are available to connect with. So they know how to get with people in those times if they need to. But it takes a pretty big mind shift to get to that point where you're truly allowing yourself and your company to prioritize the needs of your people above the needs of the company, which sounds backwards, but it works.
You know, what's interesting about that idea, which does sound backwards and it's weird, right? It's like we're trying to say something like, take your personal life and get your own personal stuff in order first. Because this idea is weird. It's backwards. It's taking care of your family first versus business first. But I read a statistic, and it was actually by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that is that only about 2.4 hours out of an 8-hour workday are actually productive in the actual work that people are doing. And I think that's really strange because now why are we at work for 8 hours? Is just to go through the motions. Well, what could people be doing with that other 6 hours if that was given back to them and their families? Well, now they're starting to take care of their personal life, their personal needs, their family life, their family needs. And then those 2 hours could be extremely productive. In fact, those 2.5 to 3 hours might even be more productive because now they're taking care of all this stuff that they couldn't take care of because they're all stressed out. They're trying to manage cleaning the house with taking your kids to a doctor appointment, taking your kids to basketball practice or whatever the heck it is. And here we are giving your kids this opportunity now to be a someone in the family. And I think that's like the elephant in the room of all this. It's like it makes your boss feel good that there is an employee sitting at the desk, but are they working and are they actually getting something done? I mean, I'm a sprinter. I just do a crap load of work in like 50 minutes. And then I chill for a while and mess around. You know?
Yeah.
And I think most people are like that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's getting your headspace into the fact that, look, you need to trust your people. You need to be hiring people that know how to accomplish their job and they know what's expected of them. And there's training that's a part of that. And that means you need to be organized as a management team and what it takes for people to give people the freedom to manage their life, which includes their work and their personal life, to give them the space to manage their life and accomplish everything they need to. You need to let them prioritize some things over their work. That doesn't mean that they're making their personal life more important than work. It just means that sometimes they will have to do personal things over work things, and they're working all those things out and you're giving them the space to figure out what that looks like for them. Look, if you don't trust people enough to do that anyway, why are you paying them so much money? I mean, if you don't trust them enough to be able to manage their life, you just might not have the right people. And you might be surprised that you get really good performance out of people when you free them up to make some of their own decisions and manage their situation the way that's best for them while accomplishing. And look, you also have to be measuring what they get done. And if they don't get done what they're supposed to, they lose their job. It's the same scenario. This is not a free pass, do whatever you want. It's getting the right people. And so for us, I know one thing that worked really well for us to find the right people is we really found that the right people that we need are generally 2 or 3 degrees of separation from an existing team member. That allows us to start out the gate strong with trust and respect. 2 or 3 degrees away from, I mean, most of us probably easily are connected to a couple hundred people. And so if you have dozens of people connected to a couple hundred people, your talent pool is quite large if you're not limited by geography and you have some great candidates available to you. And when you pick somebody that's 2 or 3 degrees away, that person has already heard of your company. They are connected with somebody that's already there. So they come in with some accountability to that other person and a desire to be a part of what you've been doing because they've been admiring you from afar for a while. And so that has really worked for us. The other piece that's been really helpful for us is this social mission that we structured around our business that gives all of us something to fight for that's bigger than our business, bigger than our brand, bigger than the products and services we deliver.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that in a second because it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's almost like if you can satisfy your employees at some base level, which a lot of times is taking care of themselves and taking care of their immediate family and taking care of some of the things going on in their community, they can then rise to a level of self-actualization relatively quickly. And if they're doing that in step with your company in a purpose that's like you're talking about, we're going to talk about in a second, this social cause or something that's got the why behind this company, the why behind the leadership, the why behind what we're doing and why you're here and what you're doing in this life. And if you can tie that all into one thing, it makes a lot of sense to follow this model because it's you get yourself right. Then you can come join our mission. And I think it's just a couple hours a day someone needs to take care of those things in their life that were kind of washed aside because of the 9-to-5 mentality we pushed in the 40s to now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really for us. I did really well straight out of school in a sales job. And for me, making more money was the output of my efforts. And making more money as a 23-year-old was never my measuring stick. It wasn't what got me excited. And at some point when you're that young and I was making more money than my dad pretty much right away in sales, it was more a burden than anything else because you got to decide what to do with the money and you don't have kids, you don't have a spouse. So it goes farther. And then you got all these people telling you what to do. For me, the why was the problem. It wasn't making more money. So when we started Abenity, I wanted there to be an output to a cause for every input into the business. And with that created meaningful work for me that I knew every success generated more impact and value outside of our brand for what we're supporting. For us, we chose to support the cause fighting against extreme poverty. And so we partnered up with World Vision, and we recently just crossed over $1 million of direct giving through World Vision towards extreme poverty. And we sponsored kids in Senegal with every new customer that comes on with our program. And then we're really involved in microfinance, which is a really cool thing to learn about, and extreme poverty. When I talk about extreme poverty, I'm talking about the 500 million people in the world that are still walking 5 miles a day to get clean water, who are not going to school, or their kids can't go to school because they're walking to get water, and they don't have access to any form of healthcare. And so the United Nations has a goal to eradicate extreme poverty everywhere by the year 2030, and they're on track with that. And we just saw that in action because 116 of the kids that we sponsor in Senegal, their community just became sustainable from World Vision's point of view. And World Vision is able to exit that community. They've lifted them up out of extreme poverty and they're moving on. So we turned those 617 kids graduated from our program, and World Vision's rolling 617 new kids into our support of them. And so that gave all of us meaningful work at Abenity and something to fight for outside of our brand. The entrepreneurial life is hard. Work life is hard no matter what. Your product, your service, your manager is always going to let you down. Your competitor is always going to scare you. And having something to fight for that's bigger than all those things keeps you motivated and keeps you going through those tough times.
I'm just kind of curious because you're in this space. You have the social mission. You have this purpose behind what you're doing. You're using some of the profits and the overflow from how you've benefited from this company to activate this social mission. Tell me, what are some of the indicators you're seeing for the reasons behind some of this extreme poverty? Just out of curiosity, what's the answer to these solutions? Or what's the solution? Yeah. What are you guys doing and what could other people do and those kinds of things?
I'll tell you, the foundational source of poverty typically starts with access to clean water. Why you see so many organizations start and center around clean water. Because when people have clean water to drink, they're healthier. They're not getting sick from the water they're drinking. If you don't have access to clean water, it means you're walking to get your water for the day. And if you're walking to get your water for the day, you're not working to make money from your family, or you're not going to school to give you the education that you need to be able to do something more proficient as an adult. And so when you can get a well in a community that doesn't have access to water, all of a sudden people aren't spending half their day just going to get water. And they're able to go to school, they're able to do a job, and then that starts unlocking this margin to do extra things.
Yep.
And learn new trades and skills. From there, it really becomes agricultural, teaching people how to cultivate their community in a productive way, how to be efficient with some basic kind of farming things. In a lot of these tribal communities in Africa and other places, they have their own way of doing things. They have also some very superstitious ways of doing things that a lot of times can be replaced with more modern techniques that once they learn, take them a lot farther faster. And then microfinance is a huge picture here. Microfinance is when you're giving just really a couple $100 to somebody to use to start their business, whether it's a lot of times it's providing them refrigeration so they can do stuff with beverages or ice cream or icy things, sewing, farming, or agriculture.
Sure. And
you're giving them just the starter capital they need, and then they agree to pay it back. And so if you donate $100 to microfinance, well, that $100 is then matched by local funding sources who aren't confident to do it without somebody else coming in and adding some accountability. They put together these savings groups of 12 people who all go in together, and they say, okay, well, if the 12 of you are together to hold each other accountable, we'll give you this much money for microfinance. The local institutions say, okay, well, if these guys are holding you accountable and organizing it, we will too. And so $100 from here turns into $300 from here, which is a lot of money for that one person in that developing world. And then from there, they have to pay that back within a year. And then it's recycled back into the group, into a new system, into a new loan. And so that initial gift of microfinance continues to circle on and lift the community up higher and higher and creates and equips more and more entrepreneurs in the community. And that's a really powerful, proven method as well.
That's a really cool model. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit on my own because I think that's kind of like a little micro economy that you're generating. And it's really interesting.
If you want to go to Abenity.com, which is our company, and there's an impact spot up top, we published our impact report, and it dives into the microfinance stories that we've been able to support. It dives into clean water and these initiatives that we've given $1 million plus to. And so it's a really quick way to get an early education on that. It's called the impact report. It's at Abenity.com up there in the impact header. So that might be worth checking out to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of discuss some of these different strategies, whether it's working remote, kind of building a cause, building a motive around the business that you grow. What advice do you just kind of have to other entrepreneurs and business leaders that might be listening to this show to kind of turn into you have a really successful entrepreneurship story, 13 years, you grew a company. Now you've kind of exited into a founder role and hired in an executive staff to run your company now. A lot of times that's arriving for most entrepreneurs out there. What's your message to these guys?
I think a big piece of our success has been building our business for a cause that's outside of ourselves. And so once I exited the day-to-day and put this leadership team in place, I really spent the last year and a half debriefing on, how do we get here? This is amazing, but I was head down for 13 years and kind of looking up for the first time in 13 years where I'm not hustling every single day and I feel healthy. I feel like I've just got one job. And I was like, what did it take to get here? And for us, it centers a lot around the social mission that built this motivated, healthy, remote culture. And we found that our social mission, once we started sharing it more publicly, it really became a competitive advantage in our space because our customers and the people looking at our services were really happy to see that we were doing something outside of ourselves for our success. And so I really kind of realized that there's 5 things that we made an impact plan around. And those 5 things were pretty simple and straightforward. But by communicating out that plan, we had a story to share with others internally and externally. And that started to build shared purpose and an aligned culture inside our company, which led to a community around our platform. And so for those listening that want to do something similar, I put together the impact plan, which is a 1-page PDF with 5 blanks to fill in for your company to say, how can we start a social mission tomorrow? And you can get an auto response with that PDF to download and personalize if you text the word impact to my phone number here, 615-802-6853. Text impact to that number, and we can try to get that in the show notes. And you will get a PDF back that you can, after you fill out a form, and you'll be able to personalize that for your company and see what kind of impact you can make with your business and how you can rally your team around that cause.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, where else can people kind of reach out to you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'd love you to check out our company, Evenity. We do corporate perks and benefits for teams of all sizes. We are the employee perks provider behind US Bank and MasterCard and HCA Healthcare. And we're providing the same level of perks to small businesses. Anybody with less than 150 employees for $150 a month. In fact, we've got a code for you to get your first month free as a small business with Winners150 from Evenity.com. Just do the code Winners150. Get your first month free as you're putting together a perks program for your employees. And your support and subscription will help us do more in the fight against extreme poverty. And I'm just glad to meet everybody today.
Wonderful. Well, hey, Brian, thank you so much for jumping on the show today. Once again, you guys are listening to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast. Winners, crushing it in life. Wallets, talking about personal finance, small business, real estate, investing, and Worldviews, talking about the business philosophies and strategies that get us there. Brian, once again, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.